My command stands firm like the mountains, and the sun's disk shines and spreads its rays over the titulary of my august person. And my falcon rises high above the kingly banner unto all eternity. So reads an inscription recorded of His Majesty Hatshepsut, taken from the book Rulers of Ancient Egypt by Russell Roberts. Hi, my name is Carrie Wills, and I will be speaking to you today on the Egyptian pharaoh Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut was one of the few women to rule Egypt as pharaoh. I have always enjoyed history, especially ancient history, from the time I was in 3rd grade. I will tell you about Hatshepsut's lineage, how she took the throne and ruled for almost 20 years, and the most recent facts about her death and eradication from history. Hatshepsut's lineage had much to do with how she became pharaoh. Hatshepsut's father was Thutmose I, and her mother, the great royal wife. Thutmose I also had a son, Thutmose II, through a concubine. However, at the time of her father's death, Hatshepsut was left as the only full-blooded heir of the mighty Thutmose I. Hatshepsut's half-brother, Thutmose II, who was also her husband, received the crown after their father's death. Hatshepsut and Thutmose II had at least one daughter. Thutmose II also had a son, Thutmose III, through a concubine. Thutmose II died after approximately 10 years, leaving the throne to his son, Thutmose II. Hatshepsut was Thutmose III's stepmother. Hatshepsut ruled Egypt for almost 7 years and then became pharaoh. How, you may ask, did Hatshepsut receive the crown after Thutmose III? Until recently, Hatshepsut has been portrayed as the evil stepmother who has stolen the throne from Thutmose III, her stepson. Hatshepsut ruled Egypt as regent for Thutmose III for almost 7 years. She then proclaimed herself king and ruled as pharaoh until her death almost 20 years later. Hatshepsut carefully observed protocol and allowed Thutmose III to also bear the title of pharaoh. However, Hatshepsut was undeniably the dominant king of Egypt. Quoted from Chronicle of the Queens of Egypt by Joyce Tildesley. As pharaoh of Egypt, Hatshepsut took all 5 of the king's royal names, such as His Majesty himself, but with a female twist, His Majesty herself. Thutmose III became after Hatshepsut's death, Thutmose III became Egypt's most successful general, as well as an acclaimed athlete, author, historian, botanist, and architect. History mentions Hatshepsut even less than a minor and unimportant pharaoh, such as the famous King Tut. Supposedly, Thutmose III vindicatively destroyed every trace of Hatshepsut after her death. Hatshepsut's mummy was found recently, stripped of anything on her person that would testify to who she was or even connect her to a royal dynasty. An article called The King Herself, written by Chip Brown and published in the National Geographic magazine, tells how several unidentified female mummies were passed through a CT scanner that enabled archaeologists to gauge their age and cause of death. The archaeologists were able to determine that Hatshepsut was indeed one of those mummies, as well as dismiss the myth that Thutmose III poisoned or in some way caused his stepmother's death. Until recently, historians have not had many facts about Hatshepsut. It has been assumed Hatshepsut seized the control of Egypt from Thutmose III and then, almost 20 years later, received what she deserved when Thutmose III supposedly poisoned her and erased her name from history. However, archaeologists and historians have now discovered that it was not immediately after Hatshepsut's death that Thutmose III chiseled out her picture and name, but it was almost 20 years later, towards the end of Thutmose III's reign. To quote an archaeologist who was quoted in the National Geographic magazine, "The destruction was not an emotional decision. It was a political decision." All images of Hatshepsut as pharaoh were destroyed by Thutmose III. However, all images of her as queen were left untouched. Because of her lineage, Hatshepsut became pharaoh. However, because she was one of the few female pharaohs, her motive for taking the throne, as well as her almost complete eradication from history, has fascinated historians and archaeologists for many years. The myths surrounding Hatshepsut's life and death are slowly vanishing like the morning mist. Even though Hatshepsut was theoretically erased from Egyptian history, she has managed to shine forth, proclaiming her accomplishments to the world. The article The King herself tells how, on one of Hatshepsut's monuments, she had inscribed, "My heart turns this way and that, as I think what the people will say, those who shall see my monuments in years to come, and who shall speak of what I have done." Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today.